My husband divorced me to marry a younger woman, but when he discovered her affair with our son, he dropped to his knees and begged me to forgive him. They had a plan to erase me and replace him. I carried the silver tray up the creaky basement stairs with hands that shook despite the steam still rising from my ginger teacups. A dozen spikes of light from the chandelier pooled on the polished coffee table in the living room, where Peter sat wrapped in his silk robe, one leg draped over the side of the sofa. Jasmine lounged beside him in her champagne-colored nightgown, the thin fabric hugging her figure like a staged photograph. Gavin sat cross-legged on the plush rug, swirling a glass of red wine with deliberate slowness, his eyes cold and empty of any recognition of me. My breath caught, and for a fraction of a second I thought I had misremembered the faces I had looked at in this same room for 42 years. The tray trembled in my hands. Despite the warmth of the tea, a sudden frost spread through my chest. "Mom," Gavin said without looking up, his tone clipped to the point of cruelty. "You are neither dead nor alive. You exist like trash nobody wants anymore." I blinked twice, the words landing in me with the weight of stones. Shame backed me toward the wall. The steam from the cups fogged my glasses as I tried to steady myself. A decade of loving mornings and whispered prayers vanished under his contempt. I managed to set the tray down. The mugs clinked softly. "It is cold tonight," I said, forcing a small smile, my voice muffled as though I were ashamed. "I only thought—" Jasmine cut me off with a short, cruel laugh, her eyes full of contempt. "You live in the basement, and you still feel cold?" Her words struck harder than any blow. Peter flicked one hand in my direction without even looking at me. "Elaine," he said, his voice calm and dismissive, "do not wander around while the rest of us are trying to relax. You belong downstairs. Just stay there quietly." The calm cruelty in his voice was enough to steal every bit of heat from my skin. I turned away, grip tightening on the stair railing behind me. I pressed my lips together as my throat pinched. But then Gavin rose, glass in hand, still not looking in my direction. He took 2 steps toward me. His voice was softer than before, but the words were knives. "Mom, you are still breathing, but you are dead inside. You are a junk heap nobody wants. We are tired of you." I froze mid-step. He was my son, my little boy who once laughed when I tickled his stomach, who fell asleep on my shoulder with a book in his hand. I swallowed against bile, my heart stuttered, then stilled. Peter inhaled slowly behind him, the cigarette smoke curling in the chandelier light. His voice was low, resigned. "Elaine, why are you even here? I married Jasmine because there is nothing left in you that I want to hold." Each word was an erasure of our marriage, our children, our shared nights and mornings. Jasmine leaned her head against Peter's shoulder and smiled condescendingly. Her words floated between us. "A woman who cannot take a graceful exit will eventually become a burden." Her voice was sweet, but I felt only the sting. I closed my eyes for a heartbeat. The walls and rug and chandelier were the same as always. They had simply become a darker canvas, painted with betrayal. I opened my eyes. I did not cry. I did not plead. I did not fall to my knees. My legs gave way with a quiet thud as I pivoted slowly. The tray tipped. One mug rattled across the floor, but I held the other cup steady. My heart that had once shattered and mended again, now stiffened like tempered steel. I slid past them into the hallway. Along the wall I had adorned with decades of family photos. Their smiles were ghosts now. I passed the study, the framed diplomas on the wall, the echo of my old life breathing in the bookshelves. Their silence weighed heavier than words. I descended the basement stairs, slower this time, as if carrying 30 years of dignity down with me. I stopped on the last step. The basement door stood open behind me like a wound. My bones ached, but my spine remained straight. I placed the remaining teacup on the cracked floor tile of my space, my exile, where the single bare bulb flickered overhead. The steam curled upward and dissipated. I wrapped my coat tighter around me, feeling the weight of emptiness and defiance settle in my chest. I did not feel broken. I did not feel defeated. My heart did not shatter. It had grown stronger. It beat slow and steady, resolute as rock. I looked at the concrete walls that had become my home and took a quiet breath. I would not vanish. I would not plead. I would not collapse. I would wait. I would remember. I would rebuild. When I first married Peter, I was a 23-year-old accountant with a sharp mind, calloused fingertips from grading night school exams, and the stubborn belief that love, real love, was built, not stumbled upon. Peter had dreams, grease on his hands, and a rented garage with one leaky roof and 3 loyal customers. I remember standing in that cold little building with a clipboard in hand, calculating oil costs and net margins, while he adjusted a carburetor with his sleeves rolled up, smiling like he owned the world. And in a way, he did, because he owned my heart. I supported him while teaching adult finance at the community center 3 nights a week. We made spreadsheets by candlelight. We joked about our luxury dinners of canned soup and crackers. On our first anniversary, he gave me a bouquet made from used spark plugs tied with a ribbon. I laughed until I cried. We were broke, young, and too full of belief to be afraid. Eventually, the garage grew, the bank account stabilized, and with it came a small house on the east side of town, the one I would later be banished from. When Gavin was born, my whole world shifted. He came into the world on a rainy September night, red-faced and screaming with a head full of hair. Peter cried harder than I did. Gavin was curious, brilliant, and sweet beyond measure. He followed me like a shadow and used to wrap his tiny fingers around my thumb every night before bed. For years, our life moved in quiet, joyful rhythms: report cards, soccer games, flu seasons, burnt casseroles, midnight Christmas tree decorating. But nothing lasts forever. At 62, I had a mild stroke. I recovered, mostly, but something changed. I could no longer run up the stairs without resting. My memory occasionally skipped like a scratched CD, and my handwriting grew shakier. Peter began to treat me like a porcelain relic. He stopped asking me about garage finances. He started attending more networking mixers, but came home late and cold. I blamed myself. Maybe I had become boring. Maybe I had grown old in a way that embarrassed him. Then Jasmine appeared. At first, she was just a name, Gavin's new personal trainer. I remember him saying she was helping him get his confidence back. She was younger, of course, fit, blonde, that gym-fresh tan, and an Instagram-perfect smile. When Gavin introduced her at dinner, she wore a skin-tight dress and called me ma'am. I should have known then. I should have felt the shift in the room. She and Peter hit it off too quickly. They shared protein shake recipes and joked about my outdated cooking. I thought it was harmless, a phase. Peter needed attention, and Jasmine was just a sparkle he would forget once the novelty faded. I laughed at my own jealousy. But then, 6 months later, Peter told me we needed space. He wanted a divorce. No fights, no screaming, just a hollow conversation in the kitchen over leftover lasagna. I need to find happiness again, he said. Real happiness. I thought we built that together, I replied. He didn't answer. 2 weeks later, he moved Jasmine into the house, into my home. They remodeled the master bedroom. The garage paperwork disappeared from my desk. My name slowly vanished from the utility bills. One by one, the things I built were erased like pencil marks beneath a pen. Gavin changed too. He stopped hugging me, started ignoring my calls. One evening, I heard him tell Jasmine in the hallway, "She acts like we owe her something." That was the first time I felt truly alone. They moved me into the basement for comfort, they claimed. Jasmine said it was quieter down there, more appropriate for someone recovering. The room had no windows, no curtains. I told myself it was temporary. I still wore my wedding ring. I still baked cookies for them. I still folded Peter's socks. I thought if I just stayed kind long enough, they'd remember I belonged. But they didn't. I started noticing things. Jasmine's hand lingering too long on Gavin's shoulder. Inside jokes I was not part of. Whispers that stopped when I entered the room. A lipstick smudge on Gavin's wine glass. One afternoon, I caught them smiling at each other in the reflection of the kitchen window while Peter fiddled with the stereo. Then I saw it. A photograph. Gavin and Jasmine at a hotel poolside. She wore the same swimsuit she claimed was from years ago. They were holding hands. The caption on Gavin's phone screen read, "Forever starts with fire." That night, I sat in the basement for hours with the lights off. The walls felt closer than ever before. I did not sleep. The next morning, I opened my old teaching suitcase, and retrieved the mini recorder I used during accounting lectures. I placed it beneath the couch cushion in the living room. That was the day the final thread of hope snapped, not with a bang, but with a smile that was never meant for me. After the divorce was finalized, I was officially a guest in the very house I had poured 42 years into. They let me keep the basement, a cold concrete space with a mildew smell that clung to the walls no matter how many lavender sachets I tucked into drawers. They called it a transitional arrangement, but nothing was transitioning. I was just being erased, piece by piece. Gavin disconnected the landline I had used for over 2 decades. "Nobody calls landlines anymore, Mom," he said without meeting my eyes. "Besides, you've got your old cell. That should be enough." That old cell barely held a charge and only dialed out on speakerphone. When I asked Peter, my ex-husband, now Jasmine's husband, about getting it fixed, he waved me off. "Elaine," he said, sipping wine on the back porch, "you need to stop clinging. Let us take care of things now. Just rest. Let them take care of things." That phrase sat like ice in my chest. Jasmine, meanwhile, had assumed her role like she had trained for it. She hosted dinner parties in my kitchen, rearranged the spice rack, bought new curtains, and started wearing my old apron as if it had always belonged to her. She greeted guests at the front door with kisses on cheeks and her hand on Peter's shoulder. I was introduced, if at all, as Peter's first wife, or worse, Elaine, who's still here for a bit. Sometimes she would pass me in the hallway with a cloth in her hand and sniff the air dramatically. "Is that mothballs?" she'd ask, no one in particular. Once I walked into the kitchen to find her wiping down counters. She glanced at me and smiled, all teeth and no warmth. "Could you sweep the entryway? We're expecting company, and first impressions are important." I did it. I swept the floor of the house I'd paid half for, and I said nothing. Then the door to my past began to close for good. One morning I came upstairs and found the drawers in Peter's old filing cabinet slightly open, files I had carefully organized. The deed to the house, tax returns from our early years, insurance policies were missing. I confronted Peter, but he just shrugged. "Probably misplaced," he said. "Jasmine's organizing our records. You never really kept up with all that, did you?" That night I returned to the basement and sat on the edge of the bed for hours. Something had shifted. This was not just a social rearrangement. This was strategy. They were unrooting me from everything: history, memory, legality. I wasn't just being ignored. I was being erased. That week, I took a bus across town to an electronics shop that sold outdated surveillance gear. The clerk didn't ask questions when I bought 3 miniature voice recorders. They looked like flash drives and were barely bigger than a lipstick tube. I also bought an external battery pack, just in case. When I returned home, I waited until the house was empty. I unscrewed the base of the hallway lamp and slid one recorder deep inside. Another went beneath the living room armchair cushion, where Peter always sat after dinner. The third I hid inside the air vent of the kitchen, facing the counter, where Jasmine liked to whisper into her phone. I didn't know exactly what I was listening for, but I knew how patterns worked. I had taught math. I had balanced budgets tighter than any man in our garage's payroll. When numbers didn't add up, there was always a reason. Later that week, Jasmine walked past me with her usual smirk and said, "Careful coming upstairs, Elaine. The floorboards are getting old, like everything else from before." I smiled, not because it was funny, but because I had just replaced every light bulb downstairs with motion sensor bulbs. And I knew exactly how many times a night they moved through that hallway when they thought I was asleep. The night after that, Peter asked Jasmine, right in front of me, if she had seen the folder labeled Home Equity Transfer. She said no, but I saw the twitch in her cheek. The next day, I found an envelope shoved beneath the back porch swing with a copy of my old living will, ripped in half. That was when I stopped waiting for kindness. I stopped wishing they'd change. I stopped praying for decency. I was not a forgotten old woman. I was a witness. And now I was going to be a mirror, let them see what they truly looked like when the mask fell. The footage was grainy, black and white, but unmistakably clear where it mattered. The date stamp blinked silently in the top corner of the screen. I sat hunched over the old laptop in the basement, the faint hum of the heater kicking on behind me. At first, I thought Gavin was just leaning over the couch to grab something from Jasmine's hand. That was what I told myself, but then his hand cupped her face. She smiled. He kissed her. Not a peck, not a mistake. A deep, lingering kiss, followed by the kind of look a man does not give his stepmother or his mother's replacement. I paused the video and stared at the frozen frame. Her head tilted into his neck. His fingers traced her thigh through the silk of her robe. The one Peter had bought her last Christmas. The taste in my mouth turned bitter. My own son. I clicked to the next clip. Another night. The same couch. This time Gavin was shirtless. She was curled beneath his arm, whispering something that made him laugh. He kissed her collarbone. The intimacy was unmistakable. I wanted to look away, but I needed to see it. I needed to burn it into memory. Proof. I opened the audio folder next. 3 days ago. The kitchen vent mic had picked it up. Jasmine's voice was low, coated in false calm. We get her into the nursing home first. You file the emergency paperwork. Just say she's been forgetful. That fall in the hallway? Use it, Gavin answered, voice smug and assured. Already drafted the request for involuntary care. Signed Dad's name last week. He won't even remember. Then her voice dropped into something more chilling. Once she's gone, I can sign the property transfer. He trusts me. He signs everything, Gavin. And after that we just wait. His heart meds are delicate. Just a slight increase, accidentally, she interrupted, matter of fact. And he drifts off, quietly, no struggle, no autopsy. I hit pause. My own breath was louder than the recording. My hands shook, but not with fear, with fury. My son, my blood, plotting with the woman who seduced my husband to kill the man he once called father. Just to take the house, just to own what they did not build. They did not whisper. They planned like veterans, efficient, cold, dead behind the eyes. I pressed play again, needing to hear the rest. Jasmine, we'll say it was his time. You'll comfort the neighbors, I'll be the widow, they'll never know. Gavin, and when the dust settles, we marry quietly. A year later, nobody questions it. I'll inherit everything. You'll be safe. I stared at the laptop screen, heart pounding, my stomach turned, and for a second I thought I might throw up. But I didn't. I couldn't afford to. I closed the laptop, sat in the dark. My own son, my ex-husband, the woman I had once tried to welcome, all of them tangled in betrayal and greed. But I would not give them what they wanted. Not fear, not silence, not an early death. I opened the cedar box on my shelf. Inside was a flash drive, backups of every file I had recorded. Dates, times, dialogue. I tucked it into my coat pocket. Then I stood, and just like that, the woman they thought had faded came back into focus. I did not cry. I wrote names. I made lists. I called a number I had not dialed in 20 years, Margaret Lowe, now a retired federal judge, once my closest friend from the firm where I had worked, the woman who once told me, Elaine, if the world ever tries to erase you, just call me. I'll bring the pen. She answered on the third ring. And when I told her everything, she said only one thing. I'll be there by morning, and we'll do this right. Because some women break when betrayed, and some sharpen. I started forgetting things. At least, that was what they believed. Jasmine, I said one morning, my voice soft, uncertain. What day is it again? She barely looked up from her phone. Wednesday. Oh, I smiled, blinking slowly. I thought it was Sunday. I was going to bake cookies. You do not need to bake anything, she muttered. Just rest. I nodded, clutching the hem of my cardigan like a confused child. Let her think I was slipping. Let her believe the performance. I had practiced the tremble in my hand, the vacant stare, the unsure shuffle of my feet. Every moment a rehearsal, every word a snare. One afternoon, while I shuffled around the kitchen wiping down an already clean counter, I asked, Jasmine, dear, will you and Gavin move away after I go? She paused, then smiled, not kindly, but with that patronizing gleam I had come to recognize. No, we will stay here. This will be our family home. Will you marry him? I asked, looking up at her with wide, naive eyes. She laughed, more at herself than me. Eventually, yes, once everything is sorted. Peter would be happy for you, I added, watching her eyes. He always said Gavin reminded him of himself. She leaned closer, a whisper now. Peter has no idea, and he never will. I pressed the edge of the dish towel tighter between my hands. concealing the small recorder sewn into the lining. Her voice was crisp, clear, and damning. Later that evening, Gavin came home drunk. I knew by the way the door slammed, the unsteady thud of his footsteps on the stairs. He stormed into the kitchen, eyes bloodshot, anger radiating off him. "You told Peter about the house deed, didn't you?" he snapped. I didn't answer. "Did you?" he bellowed. I turned slowly, pretending not to understand. I thought I was supposed to clean the silverware. He slammed his fist on the table. "Don't play dumb with me, mother!" I flinched, just enough to feed the performance. "I'm sorry, I forget things sometimes." "You better forget everything," he hissed, "or next time I'll make sure you do." He stormed out, muttering obscenities, his voice growing distant as he climbed the stairs. My hands were still trembling, but not from fear, from rage. I reached beneath the table, peeled the small recorder from where it had been taped. Still blinking, still alive. I pressed stop. Everything was on there. His threat, her plans, their laughter. I tucked it into the pocket of my cardigan, then sat back down with the dish towel still folded in my lap. They thought they were tightening a noose around my neck, but I had already woven it around theirs. I waited until the house was quiet, until Jasmine and Gavin were both out at the gym. Another training session, they claimed. I slipped into the study and locked the door behind me. I sat down at Peter's old desk, where the drawers still smelled faintly of cedar and the cologne he used to wear. With trembling hands, I opened the laptop I had hidden under the floorboard in the basement, a gift to myself from years ago, bought with cash, never used online. I inserted the memory card from the recorder. I listened to the conversation again, each word searing like acid. "Push the dosage just enough. It's not murder, it's mercy. If he signs over the deed, we'll have control within a week. After the funeral, we'll get married. It'll look like grief brought us together." I opened a new email and typed the address I still remembered by heart, though it had been over 15 years since we last spoke. Subject: "You are Judith, private. Dear Judith, I hope you're well. I'm sorry for the suddenness. I have a matter of extreme legal and personal danger. Please review the attached audio files and documents. I believe a crime is being planned against my ex-husband and myself, and I need your guidance. Yours always, Elaine." I attached the audio, scans of my original house deed, Peter's medical prescriptions, and the photo I had taken of the fake signature they'd tried to forge on a property transfer form. Then I hit send. Judith called within the hour. "I never thought I'd hear from you under these circumstances," she said, her voice strong but soft. "Neither did I replied. She asked questions carefully, precisely, as if already drafting the legal outline in her mind. I answered each one, steady, despite the rising storm in my chest. "That signature is a forgery," she said after a pause. "And the audio, Elaine, this isn't just fraud, this is attempted murder. We're calling in the police." I closed my eyes. I was hoping you'd say that. Over the next 48 hours, Judith coordinated with the county sheriff and the financial crimes unit. She used her retired federal judge credentials to push the matter swiftly. She was respected, feared even, and she had clout. They devised a sting. Wait for the moment Jasmine would try to get Peter to sign the false deed. "She'll push him soon," I warned. "He's been sluggish lately. She's trying to accelerate the process." "We'll be ready," Judith said. "You just need to act like nothing has changed." I laughed bitterly. "That's all I've been doing for years." They gave me a wire, a small microphone pinned beneath my bra strap. It itched like guilt. I was to pretend to assist Jasmine with filing the final paperwork. Judith coached me through the legal lingo. I memorized every phrase. Peter, oblivious to the plot, had started taking extra pills, at Jasmine's insistence. "It helps your sleep," she said sweetly. I swapped one of the capsules and had it tested. The results came back from the lab. A tranquilizer, mixed with a blood thinner, it would have caused a silent internal bleed in his sleep. "Can we warn him?" I asked Judith. "Not yet. We need the paper signed under pressure. It's the only way the court will prove coercion." So I waited. I played the part. I folded towels with Jasmine. I smiled at Gavin over dinner. I asked them about their weekend plans. And every time I looked at their faces, I saw nothing but ash. They had burned every bridge to get here. They just didn't know I had built a new one behind them, with legal steel and quiet fire. The night before the sting, I sat in my basement room, surrounded by dusty books and photos of Gavin as a child. I stared at one of us at the zoo, him riding on Peter's shoulders, me laughing behind the camera. He had been kind once. Soft. He had begged me not to go to work when he was sick, clinging to my sleeve. That little boy was gone. I folded the photo into my journal and wrote a line beneath it. Tomorrow, I let go. Morning came cold and gray. Jasmine knocked on the study door. "Elaine," she said sweetly, "Peter wants to finalize those papers today. Would you mind helping me with the notary stamp? You used to handle documents, right?" "Of course," I said, smiling. "Let me get my glasses." I walked up the stairs, the wire live. Judith was already in position with officers down the street. The second Jasmine slid that paper across to Peter, asking him to just sign this, for tax purposes, the storm would begin. I sat at the table across from them. Peter looked tired, dazed. Jasmine held the pen out. "Sign here, love," she said. "It's nothing big, just a little paperwork for our future." Peter looked at me. "Elaine, this okay?" I looked back, smiled faintly. "It is more than okay, Peter," I said softly. "It's justice." And then the door burst open. Badges. Commands. Jasmine froze mid-breath. Gavin screamed from upstairs. I closed my eyes and whispered, "It's done." I entered the living room carrying the coffee tray, my heart pounding in my ears. Peter was seated at the table, a pen trembling in his hand, and Jasmine hovered beside him, her face soft, her smile practiced. Gavin stood behind her, his posture respectful, his expression calm, like he'd rehearsed this moment. "Just sign here," Jasmine said, sliding the document across. She spoke softly, intimately, as though offering a gift. Peter glanced at me. His eyes were distant. I came to stand beside him. "Honey," I said, voice steady, "you know how much I miss the old days. Sometimes I help with these papers." Jasmine's eyes flicked to me, almost surprised. She recovered with a polite nod. Gavin's grip on the back of Peter's chair tightened. I took a breath. The wire pinned to me buzzed in response. Judith and the officers were listening. Peter's hand shook as he hovered over the signature line. "Elaine?" he asked, voice cracking. Tears glistened in his eyes. I knelt beside him, placing my hand atop his. "It's okay," I whispered. "You're safe." Jasmine's expression flickered, pleasure at her success in manipulating him. Gavin shifted forward, looking down at me as if for approval. My throat tightened. I nodded. "Sign." Peter pressed the pen to paper. In that split second, a powerful sense of calm washed over me. I knew this was my moment. "Stop!" shouted a voice from the hallway. The front door burst open. Detective Ramirez stormed in with 2 uniformed officers behind her. "Jasmine Lee and Gavin Morgan, you're under arrest." The document and pen clattered to the floor as Jasmine gasped. Gavin froze, his face draining of color. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. The officers moved to cuff him while Detective Ramirez turned to Jasmine. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Jasmine's voice cracked. Then she began to sob. I stood, trembling but straight. Detective Ramirez walked over to me. "Mrs. Wilson, are you okay?" I nodded. Tears threatened, but I swallowed them down. "Yes." My voice was soft, but firm. Ramirez handed me a small audio player. "Would you like to play the recording now?" Jasmine stared at me, terrified, as I pressed play. Their voices flooded the room. "Push the dosage just enough, and he'll slip away quietly," Jasmine whispered. Gavin's cold laugh followed. "Then we'll have everything. The house, the money, a new life. No messy ties to the past." They both said it. Their words echoed louder than any screams. I watched Peter's face crumble. He sank forward, crushing the table with his fists, tears cutting deep lines down his cheeks. Detective Ramirez paused the recording. "This is direct evidence of conspiracy, fraud, and solicitation to commit murder." The officers finished arresting Gavin and Jasmine. He was quiet, eyes shadowed. She wailed, tugging at the cuffs, screaming, "He lied to me! It wasn't real! He tricked me!" But her pleas fell hollow. Peter stood, unsteady, and walked toward me. His knees buckled, and he dropped to his knees, grabbing the hem of my skirt. "Elaine, please. I was blind. I was wrong. Please forgive me." His voice shook. Tears spilled down his face. Time slowed. He clung to me, quivering with guilt and regret. The floor creaked under his weight. Jasmine's cries echoed in the hallway as she passed by, forced into the cruiser. I looked at the pen in his hand, the instrument of their betrayal. I looked at the trembling man before me, my husband for 42 years. I could feel every moment of heartbreak press into my spine. I drew a breath and knelt to his level. "I don't need you to kneel," I said quietly. "I need someone to stand by me when I tremble, not someone who breaks me and begs forgiveness afterward." I stood. Peter stayed on his knees. I reached down, touched his cheek. It was damp. "I need someone who remembers who I am," I continued, "not someone who discards that memory for comfort." He lowered his head, silent. Detective Ramirez moved closer. "Sir," she said quietly, "you may go. We need to process your statement." He looked at me for a moment, confusion and sorrow mingling in his eyes. Then he slid away, allowed himself to be gently led out by the officer. I watched him go. The room felt hollow. The officers gathered the documents, the audio player, Jasmine's phone, and the signed deed. They snapped photos and cataloged everything. Detective Ramirez paused at the door. "Mrs. Wilson, Elaine, this was brave. You saved a life. We won't press any charges against you. We will support you through prosecution." I nodded. "Thank you." She stepped out. The door closed softly. I remained standing alone in the living room. The early afternoon sun filtered through the drapes. I walked to the window and touched the glass, as though reaching for something I'd lost. My phone buzzed. It was Judith. "They're in custody. File is locked. I'll call tomorrow." I closed my eyes and exhaled a long breath. My hands trembled slightly, but my heart felt lighter than it had in months. The weight of the betrayal had lifted, replaced with justice. I turned toward the hallway where Peter had knelt. A single pen lay at the threshold, cold and heavy. I picked it up. My fingers lingered. I didn't cry. I just let the tears come when they were ready, later, in the quiet. For now, I walked down the hall toward the stairs. I paused at the basement door, thinking of the weeks I'd spent there, silent, hidden. I gently closed it. The house felt different now, quieter, but safe. The air held a promise of renewal, an invitation to rebuild. And behind me, in the foyer, stood a woman who had taken back her life. Not through vengeance, but by standing still when the world tried to shove her down. I walked out into the sunlight. The courtroom had emptied weeks ago, but the echoes remain. Jasmine Lee faced convictions for incest, conspiracy to commit murder, and asset fraud. Patricia Ramirez, Detective Ramirez's full name, testified that the recorded conversations were a blueprint of betrayal, unmistakable proof of their twisted scheme. The judge's gavel fell with finality. Jasmine was sentenced to 25 years behind bars. The moment I heard those words, a dark weight lifted from my chest, the weight of dread, fear, and shattered trust. Gavin Morgan's fate was swift. The judge revoked his inheritance, citing conflict of interest and undue influence. He was ordered to vacate the property immediately. With a single signature, I reclaimed ownership of our home. Just like that, the two people who stole so much were forced to step into an empty world of consequence. I filed revised estate documents. No longer did Peter or any of my children stand to inherit. All proceeds, house, savings, investments, were designated for the Elaine Reclamation Fund, a foundation to support elder women escaping abuse, coercion, or neglect. I detailed stipulations, priority to survivors, legal education, and housing support. It was my testament not to bitterness, but to justice and purpose. Peter, my husband of over 42 years, was a broken man. He sold his possessions and rented a small apartment nearby. He begged for forgiveness, visited every Thursday, sent tearful letters pleading, but every advance met a firm refusal. I couldn't bring myself to allow him back into the sanctuary they'd tried to destroy and stole from me. The trust had shattered beyond repair. After the trial, I initiated repairs. The basement was cleaned and refurbished into a counseling center. The grand living room was restored, not just with fresh paint and curtains, but with a mission: to host workshops for women over 60 to learn financial literacy and legal self-defense. I hired a small team of retired attorneys and accountants as volunteers. We named it the Elaine Center for Financial Empowerment and launched our first class within a month of the verdict. My old accounting skills returned with surprising ease. I would stand before a whiteboard, marker in hand, teaching a room full of nervous, hopeful women how to read bank statements, identify predatory schemes, and protect their assets. Each Friday, a room full of mug-clutching grandmothers would laugh and learn, lifting the dust of isolation from their shoulders. These sessions grew into a weekly support network, weaving bonds of friendship and solidarity I hadn't realized I craved after losing so much. One chilly winter evening, exactly 7 months to the day since the arrests, I sat alone by the fire in my refurbished living room. The soft glow illuminated the walls I'd restored, and across the room my youngest granddaughter, Lily, 10 years old, was curled in a chair, her eyes wide with curiosity. She held a mug of hot cocoa, the steam curling into the air like comfort. She looked at me and asked, "Grandma, why do you keep teaching at the house? Don't you ever get tired?" I smiled at her innocence. "I teach, sweetheart," I said, voice soft, "because no one should feel like they don't matter just because life tries to erase them." I paused, glancing at the flickering flame. "That includes you too." She nodded, sipping her cocoa. "It's evening now," I continued, "and the house still belongs to me, not because of paper or law, but because of what I choose to give it. Dignity." She leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. "I like it here, Grandma." It was enough. Enough to know that everything I had endured, all the pain, betrayal, and fight, had led to a place of peace I never expected to find again. 2 months later, the media caught wind of the center's new Guard Her Rights initiative. We helped dozens more in rural areas secure legal counsel or rescue savings lost to unscrupulous family members. That summer, a local newspaper wrote, "Elaine Wilson didn't just take back her life, she's giving back thousands more theirs." I clipped the article and framed it on the wall, beneath a photo of Patricia Ramirez handing me the keys to my house after the trial. Peter reached out again. This time he called me in tears, asking if I needed him for anything. He offered to volunteer or donate. My heart tightened, remembering the forest of lies and the moment he first told me I was nothing to him. I thanked him gently over the phone, but made it clear we were no longer we. He came to see me once, to pick up old photographs from the basement before I converted it. He rinsed the photos in his hands as though trying to recapture memory. I saw sorrow behind his gaze, but I didn't step forward. I stayed in the doorway of the counseling center. I realized reconciliation doesn't always mean rebuilding a bridge. It sometimes means stepping onto solid ground and letting the other person find their own. As autumn settled in, I sent Lily back to school, and I resumed evening classes. One week, after helping 30 women create wills for their families, I tucked the last seat cushion, turned down the lights, and paused. The center was quiet and warm. The scent of pine logs burned gently in the fireplace. I stood in the doorway, looking at the empty classroom. Each desk held the imprint of someone's newfound confidence. Each student's face came to mind, and I realized I had done more than rebuild a house. I'd restored dignity to a community. That night, I lowered the lights further and crossed to the mantel. I lifted a framed note from the judge who handled the case. "Your courage changed how elder abuse is perceived in our state." I smiled, and my reflection smiled back. Then I looked at a simple quote plaque on the wall. "She stood still, and justice marched in." Below it were photos of my family as they once were. Peter smiling at me in a wedding gown, baby Gavin in his crib, early Christmas mornings with homemade cookies. They used to be my world. Now they were notes in my history, but not my ending. My phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. "Holiday fundraiser next week. You ready?" I tapped. "Yes, see you there." I set the phone down. I returned to the hearth and sat in my chair. Lily's scarf hung next to my knitting basket. I touched the soft pastel yarn, paused, and whispered, "We are not trophies of pain. We are witnesses of resilience." My eyes drifted to the frost-tipped window panes. Outside, snow began to fall. Inside, the heartbeat of new beginning pulsed, strong, steady. In the warmth of the fire, I folded my hands in my lap. I had survived the worst betrayal, from the people I loved most, and came back not just whole, but stronger. My mission isn't vengeance, it is elevation. to help those who stand where I once broke. That night, I would sleep in my restored bedroom, under a quilt I'd sewn. When morning came, I would help with breakfast. Lily would join the cookie-baking brigade. The center would open by noon, and tonight I would rest, knowing I had reclaimed my life and lit a light for others to follow. They thought I would fall, I whispered to the empty room. But I simply stood still, and it was justice that chose to walk through my door. If you made it this far, thank you. Thank you for sitting with me through every silence they forced on me, every word they thought I'd never speak. This was not just my story. It's a mirror for every woman who's ever been pushed aside, ignored, or betrayed by the ones she loved most. But I'm still here. And if you are too, maybe it's time the quietest woman in the room finally gets to speak. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own mother, your grandmother, or even yourself, I ask you to do one small thing. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories. Because I've lived long enough to know justice doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it comes slow. Sometimes it comes wearing slippers. But when it arrives, it's unforgettable. More stories are waiting, stories they thought we'd never tell. Let's prove them wrong. See you next time.